I was born in Mississippi, but my mother immediately moved to Memphis, and that's where I grew up, was in Memphis. I never lived in Mississippi at all. Early family life was a little strange. I lived on Highway 78 with my grandmother, my mother, 3 uncles, 2 aunts, 7 cousins, and a couple of dogs and cats.
Wow.
In one house, you know.
Wow.
It was pretty wild. It was kind of like the Beverly Hillbillies. But we knew a little bit. We had running water. So it was pretty wild, you know. Of course, I grew up a big fan of Elvis, you know, since I was just a little tot, you know. And as a matter of fact, he lived growing up, he lived right down the street from where we lived on 78 Highway. Of course, he didn't when I was living there, but prior to that, he had lived there when he was real small. And they had moved from Tupelo to Memphis. And so that was basically starting out. That was basically where I lived with my whole family, with everybody. And there came a time my mother met a fella and remarried, and we moved away. And that was kind of a culture shock, you know, because I had all these people around all the time, brothers and sisters, cousins, but there was, you know, may as well have been brothers and sisters. And all of a sudden I'm sitting in this room alone, you know. It's weird. So I started having to, like, you know, use my imagination. And so I guess that's kind of when I started listening to music and trying to figure out how to play an instrument and stuff, you know, guitar and stuff. A Sears Silvertone. I remember my parents, they got me a Sears Silvertone with the amp in the case.
Yeah.
How do you remember that?
Yeah, with the little lipstick pickups.
Yeah, exactly,
Mm-hmm. Oh,
exactly.
Yeah.
And that amp in the case was our first PA. So.
Wow.
The speaker's about this big. My mom sang in church, but not in the choir. She sang, you know, we sat in the crowd and she sang in the crowd, and I would always listen to her sing, and she sang really good. But she told me that my grandfather was a fiddle player, and that back in the, you know, they lived back in the woods, you know, and they would have a hoedown thing at their house, and he'd play fiddle, and all the neighbors would come over and they'd square dance and stuff, you know. And so I guess that's where everybody got their musical ability, was from him. I'd ride in the back seat of my parents' car, my stepdad and my mother's car, and I'd hear the radio going with us singing these call letters and all this stuff, you know, and all these people singing on the radio other than just the music, you know, the songs. I was listening to the commercials and stuff and the call letters, you know, WDIA. I was saying, how do they do that? How do they get to do that stuff and make money for it, you know? And I would sit back there and listen to it just constantly. I'd take a radio to bed with me at night, you know, listen to the Beatles, the top 10 songs of the Beatles, you know, little transistor radio. And later on in life, I started doing that for a living. You know, I started singing call letters and stuff for radio stations and stuff. I never knew that it was like a dream that came true. But going back to the old days, I would just listen to the radio constantly. I listened to anything on it. Didn't make any difference what it was. Blues, country. Hank Williams was on the radio when I was a little kid. You know, I'd listen to that. So I was pretty much well-rounded in